how are you all doing as I'm saying all this? Is this maybe even like wave? Is this familiar to you? Any raising eyebrows about this idea of routine versus structure or schedule?
Serena, I think also for your client, just taking into consideration like the stamina that they have. So like different kids, especially kids with neurodevelopmental disabilities or differences, like have different sustained attention. So I have some students that I know they can focus for like 15 minutes, but then they need a 5-minute break. So having like a visual timer there so that they can see, okay, you're gonna work for 15 minutes and then you're gonna get a 5-minute break. And incorporating movement, you know, just to split it up. So I think knowing the stamina of the client or whoever it is that you're working with is really important too.
Yeah, and so that kind of makes me think about like, how would we know stamina? Like, what would that look like? And oftentimes when kids start to move, we think that that means that they're not learning, like they're not with us anymore. And I kind of advocate for us to look a little deeper into what that movement's about and notice that the movement is actually harder for the teacher or the parent in this instance to deal with. It's us saying, we can't focus when you're moving. You're distracting us from talking, right? And the kids on the other side are saying, I'm fine. I can still hear while I'm moving and I can still talk when I'm looking at the ground. I don't stop talking just because I'm not looking at your eyes. We're really doing those skills. It's an etiquette for the other person, but especially with neurodifferences, they're not taking that in right now. And some of them are taking it in, but it's not a priority. It's not a preferred, it's not a benefit to them to notice what your needs are. They're busy working on their own needs for all the best reasons. So really giving them ideas of that movement and saying, hey, how do we join that movement and make it incorporated into the learning? Or let's take a moment, we're seeing you moving and I'm wanting to try that on too. And then we also might, I know, I apologize, I'm not recalling names, but for occupational therapy, really thinking about how to ground them in that deep proprioceptive input, those movements, that gross motor activities to keep that so that then when they do have to sit still, they can sustain longer. Mm-hmm. So that also leads me into talking about, I've done this for so many years and it's become a part of even my own parenting, is a sensory diet. And so we think of a sensory diet, it comes from occupational therapists and they can use it within therapy, but I also see it as a way to create an environment for home learning. And so sometimes parents are feeling like, well, I don't know how to be creative, or I don't want to be like a circus. I don't know where to begin with these kids at home. There's just like, they're running all around, like don't even know where to start. And so using opposites is a great idea of like, if we did it in one room, we do it in the opposite room. If we do it inside, we do it outside. We do it high, we do it low. So opposites is a really fun way to kind of think of like, what's the theme of the day? But we also can think of a sensory diet, meaning we start the day, for example, thinking about what we smell. So we're talking while we're eating about sense of smell. And then we might move into visual. So it might be that we go on a obstacle course or treasure hunt, or we go for a walk outside and we talk about the environment. Or we might be doing a specific activity within the academics, but we're thinking about what are we seeing? What are we noticing about the words, the letters or the numbers that we're looking at? And then we might go into an exploration of sound. So now we've looked at something and we've smelled something, maybe we're going to listen to an audiobook or we're going to listen to music. So really thinking about our senses and seeing how they can play out to give us some themes can be a really fun way to kind of give some variation and give some stimulation to the activities we're doing. Recently we had St. Patrick's Day. So St. Patrick's Day could be a theme. Sometimes the themes are given to us. We could just put some green into everything. We can have a lot of time online. They're doing this a lot, but like dress up day, animal day, just bringing in those themes can make it exciting as a parent as well when you're doing this, because not all parents are teachers. So it's kind of like, okay, well, at least we could all wear a color today. And it just brings that connection a lot stronger to these children. I'm pausing again. How are we doing?
Does anyone have any questions as we're talking about this? No?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I love the distinction that you made between routine and schedule, and I can definitely see how routine would be more beneficial for this individual I was thinking of. However, a challenge that this patient does have is time estimation, and that's a reason why scheduling came to my mind over routine. So I'm wondering what you think about that.
Just to clarify, do you mean that she or this individual isn't aware of timing, or you're thinking that that's something they're working on?
Well, no, they themselves disclosed to me that they would like to work on their ability to estimate the time.
How fun. Okay, that's great. Negeen, you want to jump in? I have some ideas too. I'm so excited.
I think one of the benefits of us having students at home right now is that there is more time. So you can really emphasize like the process over the product. So there's not deadlines that have to be met. And if there are, just being a little bit more flexible and emphasizing the process. So one thing that you can do is you can make a visual schedule, which I'm sure that you use in your practice. But you can, laminate a piece of paper and then you put the items that need to be done. And then you put on one side, you're going to put like what it is. And then they have to move it to the other side. So they have to move it to the Velcro. So that can kind of help them in terms of timing. Just estimate, okay, I've completed this. I need to move to this. And these are my tasks for the day.
And I love that because you're talking about embodying it. So you're actively moving something versus just looking at something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's taking the emphasis away from this needs to be completed in 5 minutes, but this is the task that needs to be done by the end of the day. And then giving them that freedom would help.
Yeah. Something that I'm thinking about as you're saying that is, I love that this is this individual's goal that they've come up with. And then
every single goal that a patient sets is their goal.
That's great.
Unless there's lack of insight. I'm talking about just population in general, not just for with students with autism. But yeah, every single goal is their goal.
Yeah. So then it leads me to thinking about like in what time frame would they like that accomplished? Because it's a lifelong journey that we're all figuring out time management. I don't know about you guys, but I can name a few people in my life that need help with that. So the other thing I want to emphasize when we're thinking about that structure or schedule is that sometimes it's really helpful to think about person or place or subject. So it might be something like color coding when the child or individual has time together, like with the mom, with dad, with sibling, with individual time, with class, with breaks. So like, what are those colors? Sometimes it's about who's in control during those times. A lot of behavioral challenges are coming up because a child isn't used to who's in charge. At school, it might be one individual teacher or one aide who they're referring to. And now throughout the day with parents at home, it might be different. It might switch people sometimes. It might be nobody sometimes. Sometimes they have to split with their sibling. So these are dynamics that are coming up that are very new to parents. And so helping them see like, oh, look, it's time. There's 2 stickers here. It means 2 people are happening here. Now it's 3 people. Now it's 4 and so on. And then also it could be, when is it quiet time? It could be an image or it could be a color, or you could write the word, but it's like, when is it loud? When is it quiet? So you might be doing a variable of sound. When is something long or short? So really thinking about, not only is it about like, what are we doing during that, but what does the scene look like for them? That could be really, really helpful.
Just for the sake of time, I think we should probably move on to some of the educational stuff and behavior, unless there's any other questions. Does anyone have any other?
Okay. Yeah, and it goes along.
Perfect.
Jump in.
Okay. So just as we've been transitioning to this remote learning phase where students are home, one of the things that has been potentially lost is that a lot of students with special needs, like kids with autism, have accommodations or modifications that are given in the school setting that maybe are not being implemented now. So does everyone know what an accommodation or modification is, or do you want me to explain? Okay. Well, an accommodation is pretty much how a student learns the material. So what's really important for this is knowing what type of learner your student is. So are they a kinesthetic learner? Are they an auditory learner? Are they a visual learner? So if the assignment is to write an essay for a student who has a hard time with writing or has a specific learning disability with writing, they could have an opportunity to type the essay, or maybe they can say the essay to their teacher. A modification is actually when the expectation of the student changes. So for hypothetically, if you had a 3rd grade student who isn't meeting math standards, then the teacher would then expect them to meet 2nd grade criteria. So that's the difference between those. But with this remote learning, a lot of teachers aren't able to give those changes to students because they have 25 kids in the classroom on Zoom, and they don't have the capabilities to give those additional supports. So one thing that parents or support professionals can do to help, they can scaffold or break down the task. So if the task is to, I use the example of writing an essay, you can put on a Post-it note, like 3 bullet points. You're going to outline the essay, you're going to write the essay, and then you're going to proofread. And then you put that Post-it note on the desk so they see it and they know exactly what to expect. So breaking down the material is really important. And then also, like I said earlier, just emphasizing the process over the product. So taking the emphasis on time away and really giving kids that freedom to be creative and explore the material so that they're not really stressed about it.
Yeah, I was gonna add, when you're talking about like breaking down something into pieces, just that when those behaviors come out, when we think about patterns of movement, the child is moving quite fluid, like they're easy, they're relaxed in the house, and all of a sudden you see like a quick change in movement, like maybe they speed up, or instead of being still, you see pacing. Or you see them push back. No, I don't want to do that. Procrastination or delays. These are all the new way of that stress response. So we see kids, you know, it's like fight, flight, or freeze. We see it more like procrastination is like the freezing moment, like, I'm not doing that. When a kid says like, I don't know, that's another way of their saying, or survival sense of saying like, I've given up, like, I don't even know what to do here. It also can look like running outside, running away, not coming to the table kind of thing, or it could look like screaming, tantrums, fighting, right? So when that's happening, we kind of want to focus on maybe this process isn't working. And from a kind of an optimistic outlook, we can switch it. So when you're talking about how are they a learner, it's like, okay, if I present it to them and I feel like I'm a broken record and I've said something over and over again, maybe I want to take out a piece of paper and write it to them. And so that we can play with those and give ourselves permission to be like, instead of kind of hitting hard back and forth and pushing that limit, when those stress responses come up, we really want to say, oh, you know what, I'm noticing this is a challenge point. Let me switch it up. So those are some thoughts about breaking it down. It might be even putting that piece of paper over the book so we have less words on the page, smaller assignments. Yeah. And I just want to, you mentioned process versus product. For those of you that are looking into, there's great books like Grit or Carol Dweck's work, which is Mindset. So if any of those books, they're great for that process-oriented work. So I kind of started to talk about what the stress response looks like. And a lot of the struggles that are happening at home revolve around these emotions. And we have kids that show emotions and show that amygdala response of that stress quite frequently. And when you're in the home and you don't have space, it can feel like it's happening all day. So before I dive in, or we dive into tantrums and behavioral strategies, like, are there any specifics around this area that you all are thinking about or getting questions from your own work about? All right.
About what area? I'm sorry.
As we're talking about, this is about home learning, but what comes up next is those behaviors that show up, like the big emotions and tantrums or acting out or non-compliance. Anything, I just wanted to make sure if there's anything specific, let me know. So oftentimes, it's now going on 3 weeks that school has been closed, and kiddos are at home, and there are tantrums happening all the time, big reactions. And it's so easy to look at the moment and think about like, oh, the child's fighting with their sibling, or they really wanted that plate or the food, or they're having trouble with math, or like thinking it's in that moment. But I really want us to think about supporting parents to see that there's a huge change that's happened. So while we're handling the stressors of like, how long is this going to happen? Are we going to get sick? What, how's this going to play out? Our children are really taking our own cues. So kind of noticing our nonverbal communication. They're noticing that they're not with their friends. A lot of them have their own identity is defined by other people. Being in their same environment is also a way they define themselves. And then there's other kids that are doing really well with the home learning. Like this is like their best place. Like they're like, don't have to adjust. They don't have to deal with other people. Like it can be the complete opposite. But I just want us to think about what's the behavior happening, and could it be that it's just that this is a lot, this is a big change. And so rather than responding to that moment, really thinking about, wow, this is a really different day that we're having, and just taking a beat to just bring that up. And I have found, I don't know what the percentage is, but I would say up in the 90 percentile that's the first thing that's happening, and the kids are able to kind of emphasize or shut down and kind of take a break and come back. And it really wasn't about the food or the fight or whatever was going on.
So Dr. Baudino, can you explain how parents or educators would know if a tantrum is more for that like survival response, if it's for like food or sleep or access to something, versus if it's an emotional tantrum?
Yeah. There's a couple of ways. One of my go-to ways, it goes differently, but it's kind of a tool that we can use, is noticing eye contact. So when a child is more in a behavioral state, there tends to be more engagement with their eyes, meaning that they can look for that response to seek out their need. It's both areas, sensory or behavioral, is a need, but the eye contact comes in of like, I'm looking for the reaction of that cause and effect to know what I'm doing is getting me the result I need, which means maybe it's getting me to be able to leave the room. So if I scream enough and I look at mommy, then she knows that I'm getting to read the cues and noticing that now I get to leave. Versus when it's a stress response, the eyes kind of shut down, they're more internal, they're just in the survival space of big reactions. And what I see it as, like, it's like the water's poured out of the pitcher and you can't get it back in. So it's not like a water that's really high up, which is a behavior waiting to see if it's going to get that drink or it's going to get spilled. This is like the water's already tipped out. So another thing we can think of is when we're dealing with these neuro-differences, the sensory or that stress response comes up where the child will actually show a lot of shame and feeling embarrassment if you call them out on it. So you might hear a lot of like, no, I didn't say that. Stop telling me that. They'll kind of want to shut down if you're kind of pointing out that they're having a big feeling. You'll also notice that no matter what threat or consequence they're given, the behavior still happens over and over and over again. So if it keeps happening, then that's not working. The other thing that can happen is when we feel like we're a broken record, when a parent feels like, hey, every time I say this, I see it as like the child it's got an old record and it's got a skip mark. So no matter what happens, it just skips until we take that needle and move it over. So in that moment of that stress response, if we're using a lot of words and we're saying to them, stop doing that, or you need to do this, or why did you do that? We're asking lots of questions. The child's behavior is still the same. It's not changing. Whereas when it is a more behavioral based, we've kind of gone, their bodies feels organized, but they're not getting what they want. They're going to be able to hear the consequence, and it's going to make sense to them. It's going to be meaningful, and they're going to realize either it helps them get out of the situation, or it doesn't. So when they are in the stress response, we want to address that. And I would love to say all children, we first respond to them with thinking that they're in a stress space. And we want to look at, one of my go-tos that I work with parents on is looking at survival. So if we're looking at survival, then, they're being attacked by a bear, whether they are or not. And we want to we want to check with the environment. So like, can we change the environment? Can we move to another room? Can we bring in pillows? Can we bring in something soft? Can we change the lighting? We want to look at water. Actually, I always start with air. So air, we need to breathe first. So that happens when we change an environment. That happens when we change the lighting. But air also means how we're breathing. So noticing, can we model for them what we're breathing? We don't tend to like being told, take a breath. Nobody likes that. So you actually just get them moving. So when you're walking to a new spot, when you're stretching your arms, when you're going, and you're taking a breath, those are all ways we can get them to breathe. Water, food. Do we need a snack? Do we need water? Do we need to share the control? So oftentimes a child, let's say they're eating eggs, and they're at home, and you really want them to eat, and they're not eating, and now they're mad because they don't really like the eggs, and now you're mad at them because they're not eating the eggs, and so now it's 2 versus 1. It's not fair. It's you and the eggs versus the child. Instead, if we switched it and we were on the child's team, we would be going, oh man, those eggs again, they're so taking up your whole plate. Are you going to stab them and eat them like with a big bite? Are you going to get little bites? How are you going to get them? But all of us together, maybe I need to help you out in eating those eggs. So we're joining that team. When we work as a tribe, that's another way of survival. If you're being attacked by a bear and you had your group with you, it's way less threatening. So those are that survival response.
I think also, just to add on to that, it's important for like us as educators or parents to also just check ourselves and realize if a kid is in fight, flight, or freeze mode, they're not going to learn. So it's really important to connect with them and get them calm, and then you can redirect to whatever the task is, especially when you're teaching them or at home.
Yeah, I love that, because, and I know you and I were talking about that, of just how like the more we get aroused and we're yelling, then they're yelling, and no learning is getting done. And no matter how much we pressure them and tell them. So Negeen has this great little slide that it will be sent out, but it just shows that reptilian, that lower brain, downstairs brain, kind of thinking about fight, flight, or freeze, and then how we get into the upstairs brain, how we get into this prefrontal cortex of thinking and rational thought and planning and program and thinking outside the box, is that through that body control, through movement, through empathy, connecting with one another. So we'll send that over to you all.
Does anyone have any questions about behavior or emotional regulation, or any questions that have come up? You can also feel free to write it in the chat if you don't want to talk out loud.
Okay. Have any of you heard about this idea of looking at that stress response first before going into kind of the consequences or expectations that we're doing? Is that familiar?
I see nods. Yeah.
Nods. Okay. Yes. Okay. And then also another thing that's coming up a lot that I just wanted to touch upon, I hadn't thought about it before, was just that there's this balance of, we have some parents that lean very much to kind of setting firm limits and sticking with them and expectations. And then we have the far other side where we have parents that are like feeling like, well, I don't want to be mean, or I don't want to, make them upset. So then it can be very indulgent. And so it's really important to find that balance. And I encourage us as providers and parents to really think about, the more we are authentic, the more we're promoting authenticity. So like, when I know my limit is if the kids are really loud in the house, per se, like parents have told me, like when the kids are just, everyone's talking, it's too much, and I feel like I'm going to explode. So it might be, rather than waiting till the volume goes so high that we explode, it's anticipating, oh, this is so predictable. We've been inside for an hour. It's going to get loud. So before it gets there, I'm going to let them know, hey, you guys are doing awesome playing, or whatever activity they're doing. But now we're doing, and that's when we go into those sensory systems. So now we're doing something very visual. It's like a non-compete. Like, we can't be screaming while we're eating, where our mouth's occupied, or we can't be, when we're looking and we're inspecting something with our magnifying glass, we're probably not going to be screaming and running around. So really thinking about how to pair those, but knowing our limit before we get there, and setting it from the beginning. So really saying like as soon as that loud voice comes up, it's shutting it down versus getting to 10 later on. And a big comment that's coming up a lot is, if my child's at a 10, and we tend to think we should stay calm to bring them down. With our sensory neurodifferences kids, sometimes, and this is a tricky one, it's a dance, but when they're high, sometimes we have to be high to co-regulate them down. So that doesn't mean we're yelling at them like we're mad. It means we're being louder. It means we're being faster. So we're matching them on a body level, and then we're bringing them down. I see it as, Sabine, I'm thinking about you with rock climbing. I use this example of rock climbing. It's like, if your child's up there, you can yell at them all you want to get down. If they're up there, they're going to be like stuck on the rock. But we want to go up there with them, be as loud and as high and as strong as them, and then be like, okay, now let's get down. So thinking about those limits of our own, and thinking about that as you're working with parents. So I know our time is flying.
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly add to that. Dr. Baudino, you talked about priming, which I think is really important. So students in school, they know what to expect. They have a schedule every day. They know what's expected of them. And now a lot of them don't know what to expect, and it creates a lot of anxiety for them. So I think incorporating these routines and schedules and just priming them, like a phrase as simple as, okay, first we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. That can really help relieve a lot of the anxiety for a lot of these kids, and they know what the expectation is, and then they can do whatever it is they need to do.
Yeah. So I thank you for I'm seeing some questions on the side. I know I'm talking about the body and sensory systems and movement. So I will put together some information that you all can have as well. But at minimum, it's just for you all to kind of think about, hey, there's some great tools that are right in front of us that the child's showing us, that we can just pick up from them. So we wanted to end with self-care. We kind of started with self-care, we'll end with self-care. Negeen, I'll let you kind of check in about this. And
yeah, so
some self-care people here with us.
In order for us to take care of our students or our children, we have to take care of ourselves first too. So that's the first thing. But in terms of our kids, just making sure that their basic needs are met. So healthy eating, and Dr. Jamie, I might have you speak a little bit about brain-gut connection. Making sure they're getting adequate sleep. I know we're not allowed to be doing the normal activities we're allowed to do, but we can still exercise and get kids moving. So that's really important to get those endorphins going. Reading, and then also just changing the space. I know we're in our homes and stuff, but just getting really creative with that as well.
Yeah.
But so, Dr. Jamie, I would love if you could quickly pitch in a little bit about nutrition for some of our neurodiverse learners.
Well, as far as nutrition is concerned, and so I think stress is a huge factor to consider right now. It's the whole brain gut is very extensive, and it can be a discussion on separately of its own. But I guess immediately in a nutshell would be to eat foods that are as whole as possible and natural, and processed foods. I'm sure you all know, with any sort of neurodevelopmental disabilities, sugar is a huge negative component. Any inflammatory foods, processed, packaged, which makes it really difficult for parents, because they also want to have access to foods that are readily available, easier to prepare, to feed the kids. But those that have gone through that path and have gone down that path where they've seen the reactions of what it does to kids when processed foods are involved, high sugar content foods are involved, they're very, very careful with the way they do meal planning. And the brain gut axis issue is all about inflammation. The higher the stress level, the higher the inflammation. And that I've talked to you, Negeen, before about the production of serotonin and epinephrine, and how when the gut flora is disturbed due to inflammation, that the whole production of, the serotonin, especially, I think 98% of serotonin is produced in the gut. And it disturbs, when the gut is not working properly, it causes and has a domino effect on all other systems. So, I can go on and on about this, but if you have any specific questions, I would love to discuss further.
Yeah. Thank you. I just, as you're saying that, a couple of things with the COVID-19, and I apologize if anyone has to jump off, please feel free. I know we're at our time, but I just wanted to emphasize, I'm sorry, are you, okay. Is that sometimes it's how we create the food. So one thing that's a concern right now is the vegetables and fruit. Those aisles at the store are potentially more contaminated is a big fear, whereas packaged stuff, you can wipe the outside and hopefully the inside's safe. So it is a new dynamic that we're coming across. So, again, we kind of honor and emphasize to try our best. And I think it could be like, there are some, every day there's new information, but some things about like cooking vegetables being under heat can be very helpful. So that could be safer to potentially kill off germs. So we're thinking about, oh no, we can't have vegetables anymore. Maybe we can, we just cook them. Which again, I know there's some, we want whole vegetables and raw vegetables, but at this time there are some nuances there. And then I just wanted to emphasize for accommodations of just really thinking about being creative with a child saying no. I get a lot of comments about, oh, my child won't eat that, or they say no. I really like to think of children when they're saying no. No is a really powerful word, and yes, we want to teach them that no means no, but at the same time, no can be, I'm taking a moment, I need a beat, like I need a pause, mommy and daddy, or I wasn't predicting that, and so let me get it registered in my brain to get used to it. So when they say, no, I won't eat that, we emphasize what's true. So you're right. Right now you're sitting in your chair. You have not taken a bite. You're right. So we bring them into the here and now. And now we're going to, like you said, Negeen, and now we're going to eat that food, like the first then. We also can create fun ways to make fruits and vegetables and all this healthy eating that you're talking about, which I love. I love the vagal nerve and talking about the gut brain connection. Is putting toothpicks in food, holding yams in your hand so they can eat it. So finding ways to, like, if you can hold it, if you can pick it up, if you can change the colors and shapes. We ask the child, not that you can't eat it, but we say, how are you going to eat it? So we give them some choices versus just saying yes or no. So I just sped talk that out, but I think nutrition is so important. So I love everything you were saying about it. And then it's kind of like, okay, but then how do we get them to eat it? And this is when you're working with it all day at home, we've got this new development, but there's so much great research out there about this gut and talking about probiotics and healthy eating, especially now when there's viruses going around. So
I have a question for the doctor. I'm so sorry, I don't know your name. You were talking about nutrition. Do you have any recommendations for like other websites, books, or personal publications that you were talking about for the gut?
Unfortunately, I was not prepared and did not have the resources ready, but there's many different resources, whether online or books. And I can definitely pass those on to Negeen to share, or if there are additional kind of collaborative discussions that we may do together, I will definitely share them further. But absolutely, there's a lot of good information and resources out there.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
That would be great. Yeah. We'll
absolutely.
All right.
I think another perhaps I could work on is a tip sheet as far as food choices, and I'm a big proponent of just eating and having a well-rounded kind of within a week, not even within a day. So it's not pressured on the parent and it's not pressured on the child to eat vegetables and fruits every single day. And get creative, like you said, with how it's presented and how many times do keep presenting a fruit or a vegetable and getting the kids to try it, even with protein. But definitely during these times, flexibility is really important, and you know, giving the parents, because it's such a huge part of the daily life, especially now being at home all day. I mean, the memes that are out there and about snacking and eating, like everyone's, you know, buying 2 weeks worth of food and finishing it in 2 days. So nutrition is really important during these times, but also always having an open mind and being flexible when it comes to kids, and you know, supporting the parents as well. And what you said, frozen vegetables are always my go-to. Not necessarily fresh foods if there's any like fear around germs and the virus that's out there. Frozen vegetables are the next best thing. So and you know, cooking them and making sure that they're cooked to a temperature where it's kind of kills off whatever you know, germs that are out there, just to relieve that nervous thought and anxiety regarding what's going on right now.
They can't get away from eating them. There are ways to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Were there any other questions that anyone had before we wrap up?
So with this still the student population, so the patient also wanted to take a shower in the morning, but it's not part of her typical routine, but it's only a goal because her friends think it should be her goal. Oh, sorry, this patient's goal. So I'm wondering your thoughts around that, considering that this patient doesn't really want to do it because they don't see the reason behind it, especially because they're not moving a lot throughout the day.
Do you mind me asking how old they are?
Undergrad, typical. So
would this individual, would she be a researcher or a detective and do some of her own researching about this to see what it's like to take a shower in the morning versus not, and kind of decide on like the details of it, like what is the temperature like, what happens afterwards, how many extra steps does she have to do before she gets to the shower, like remembering all her clothes and the soaps and the lotions. Would she be like a little detective and do her own little science project about it?
Yes, yes, and alongside that, now that you're thinking about it, I need to do that as well, as far as doing the adult sensory profile. So I'll do my detective research while also asking this patient to also do that as well.
Yeah, and then it's, to me, whenever I think about when I'm hearing this idea of like, should I do it or should I not? Again, I'm thinking about the eating the food. It's kind of like, rather than saying yes or no, it's kind of like, what if we look at like how? So are we taking a long shower, a short shower? Are we using our favorite smelling soaps? And that's when you can look into that sensory piece, but really thinking about that. And then there's this other piece you're talking about, which has to do with this social identity and self-identity of like, is she doing it for someone else, that peer pressure? But again, I kind of would want her, rather than telling her we don't do things that people tell us to do kind of thing, or we do tell, like rather than deciding for her, I think it might be more meaningful for her, because you're saying she can come up with her own goals, for her to explore, does she like what her friend's saying because she literally tried it, or does she not?
Right. Thank you so much.
You know, I'm aware there's two parts there. Yeah.
Yes, and that's why it was a little tricky for me to navigate too, because I wanted to make it very individualistic and something that this patient wants to do, and I still wasn't sure of how to go along that boundary of the social aspect of it being something that this patient wants to do because of, you know, her social circle, or because intrinsically this is what the patient wants to do.
Yeah. And there's such a beautiful, also, again, peer pressure can be a tricky subject, but it also can be really beautiful in that she has this understanding that she wants to please other people, right? Like we do so much work on getting them to feel empathic. And here you have a child who's being like, I so want to my friends to, connect with me or to like me or whatever that is. And rather than seeing it as a bad thing, we also want to notice how positive that can be. Like, wow, you really care about these friends. What's that like?
Thank you.
Yeah. That's fun work that you're doing.
Oh, I love it. Every single hour it's different.
Yeah.
Sensation, weight management, pain management, migraine management, yeah. So these types of questions that that students with autism, they ask me these questions, and someone would think that they're not complex. However, there's so many complexities that go into being able to address these areas of just taking a shower. I can't approach that lightly at all, because the sensory system and how it's different.
Right. There's a lot of controversy. Negeen and I were talking about, like, do we put this sensory piece into the diagnosis of autism? It is not part of the diagnosis. It is not recognized by the medical fields. I've had people at the hospital actually say, like, I've had other providers say to me, oh, be careful. Psychologists don't use sensory integration. And I'm like, well, I'm a psychologist and I'm using it. And I actually do think it's a real thing because I can see it. Like, if the child is reacting to part of their environment, then that's a part of them. But I also look at sensory system. I add in the other two, which is interoception, this internal sense of what's going on. So like hunger, temperature, emotions, and then neuroception, the ability to detect threat or safety. And those are also compounded. So when I think of sensory, I'm thinking about like this whole system that's working together to make them connect with themselves, to another person, and to their environment. And
I would love to have a whole other conversation about that, like an hour-long conversation about that. Because that's her second goal too, being able to understand bodily cues.
Yeah, how hard is that? But she probably, and I know Sabine, you, because you're still here too, that's that question of like the body. The reason why I love the body stuff, the movement piece, is because it's not even that I specifically read it somewhere, but through working with it, it's so hard to identify what emotions are. They're so abstract and they come in and they go out. And it's so hard to even sometimes know what sensory system's working when, but we do see shifts in the body. Like we see pulling back, we see going forward, we see quickened pace or slowing down. So these are some tells that we can use. And then we're kind of like, oh, that's what that is. It gives us just another lens to see it, because it's so hard to, we need the words, we need the senses, we need the behaviors. There's like all these layers to it.
Yeah, and I think with the sensory system too, sometimes if, you have a student or a client with autism, sometimes they can't articulate what it is. So a lot of it is just trial and error. I've had students in my classroom who will have freakouts or tantrums, and then if you change the lighting, they'll be fine. Like sometimes it's just trial and error, and seeing it could be, like Dr. Baudino said, like lighting, temperature. With this client, it's water or, showering. So a lot of it is just experimenting too and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. I love in dance movement therapy, there's effort qualities, and one of the areas is time, is timing, getting fast or slow. And to me, like I could link any challenge point between two people or a person in an interaction with timing. Like it's either too slow or too fast, or one person wants it faster and the other person was too slow. Like these dynamics that come up. So when I'm thinking about the timing of the shower, like the time of day, the length of time in the shower, once they're in the shower, it can feel so indulgent. It's hard to get out of the shower. So like timing is this component that, when you're talking, Negeen, about school, it's like they could be having a great day outside on the playground. It's all indulgent. The teachers are enjoying them. And all of a sudden the teacher quickens the pace and says, now we're coming in and sitting down. It's not that they're non-compliant. It's just that the time just sped up so fast.
Yeah.
And they weren't ready for that, or that's not their preferred timing. So there's integrative listening systems like Stephen Porges' work that talks about timing and rhythm. For years I've been using, I didn't know it was a thing, but it is a thing. I wish I had been the genius to make money on it. But I've used like metronomes in sessions, or had parents use metronomes at home to listen to a beat to get their child up to that 60 beat rhythm to increase their speed at home. Because sometimes they're at a 40 or lower, they're just moving so slowly, it's hard to get anything done. Or some kids are moving at 120, 180, and they're too fast. You can't get them to sit down, but they need something to regulate them. So music and those sounds can really help them. So much stuff, guys.
I have a question about my son, if I can ask that now.
Sure.
Absolutely.
What he does not recognize when I'm being stern and when I'm yelling, and what tools do you have to help with that? Because we've been working with a occupational therapist for the last couple of days, where I'll yell and she'll explain, hey, did you understand that, did you hear that it was louder? It was, her eyes got bigger, and he's like, nope. And then, she'll have me be stern with him, and he's like, nope, don't see it, don't get it. Do you have any recommendations to help with that?
Sure. I'm just wondering, I completely value what your experience is with him, and I'm not seeing him, but I'm wondering, when he's saying no, is it, in your experience of him, is it really he's saying no, or in that moment is he saying, I'm thinking about the answer, like I'm not, meaning, so if he said no, the way you would know this would be either he really means no and he can elaborate on that, or he's saying no, and then if you gave him two choices, is this angry or is this angry? Like, could you, if you gave him two options, could he distinguish between them versus when you're just showing him one and asking him?
Well, she's shown him pictures, but it's like at the kindergarten level, somebody's smiling and somebody's, shouting, and he, of course he can pick that out because it's so different.
Yeah.
But when he's working, he sits there and laughs, and he's like, I can't hear it. I don't see it. I don't hear it. He said it all sounds the same to me.
Yeah. So I will give you a few ideas about it, but I have to say my first go-to though is that it sounds like, I want to be cautious how I say this, but I would be curious about him saying it's kind of wishful thinking. He's saying, I don't want that, or I'm not ready for that, and it's uncomfortable, so there's some laughing. And so my question would be, rather than focusing on can you read those skills, like can you distinguish these facial expressions, I would want to know what's the next step. So like, when mommy makes this face, what do you want him to do? So I would want to go into the action step of like, when you see this, let's play it out. I want you to go, what is he supposed to do when you're frustrated with him? Is he supposed to come closer to you? Is he supposed to go take a break? Is he supposed to get quieter? Is there something you think that he would do, what you would want him to do?
99% of the time, it's do what I'm asking you to do.
Can you give me an example of what that might be?
One of the things that he is not able to do is when he eats, he leaves a huge mess and he walks out. And and if you say, hey, you need to come back in and clean this up, he'll do like one or two things and turn around and walk out. And after like 3 times, you're like, you need to come back in here. And he's like, quit yelling at me. And I'm like, that wasn't yelling. And then I'll raise my voice and say, this is yelling. This is stern, because I want you, I'm tired of you not doing what I'm asking you to do after like the 5th time.
Right. Yeah, that's
really, and he's constantly saying, quit yelling at me. I'm like, and so I've gotten to the point where I'll be stern and I'll say, I'm being stern. Or, if I get so frustrated that I yell at him, like, God, just don't do it, I'll say, I was yelling.
Right.
you know.
So,
and I really don't yell hardly at
right.
all. Maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, you know. It's mostly stern, but he's constantly going, quit yelling at me.
Right.
And I'm like, well, listen to me.
Yeah. So,
you know.
So I definitely want to honor, and it's a bigger conversation, clearly, like I want to honor that it is clearly frustrating, and it feels to him like it's yelling. And ultimately, there is a space for being stern and direct, and there is definitely a space to get your needs met where he is going to learn the skills to clean up after himself. That's definitely a goal you can have. It may need to start at a place of joining him. So he might not need help cleaning up, because you said like he could go and clean up one part and he does it. So it kind of, in your mind as parent, you're thinking, well, you just did it, just do it thoroughly. But he might need some help of like that scaffolding that Negeen was even saying, of like breaking down the steps of what do we mean by cleaning up. So be very specific to him, saying, I need you to pick up 3 pieces. And then you would be doing it with him. And then it would be like, let's pick up 5 pieces. Let's pick up 20 pieces. Or, you know, or before, as he's eating, before he finishes eating, you're letting him know, I'm seeing you're almost done eating. I'm letting you know, I want you to look around and let's see how much we have to clean up. And then he's like, no. And you're saying, you're right. It's not now. You're still eating. It's not now. But when you're done, we're going to pick up our food. And so you're giving him that priming before it ends. And then as it ends, he's already remembering it. And then you're doing it with him. And there's a ton of research out there is talking about like when 2 people see the journey, I was talking about those egg example before, when you are joining with him in that shared space, his brain actually can lessen the stress load and he's able to accomplish the task. And so again, you can get to the place of getting everything you want where like when you say do this, he does it. That is absolutely available. But if it's not working yet, we have to get him up to that place. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so like yesterday or today, he baked a cake. And when he was done, I said, okay, you know, you need to clean up. Okay, Mom, I did. And I told him again, you know, okay, you need to go in and finish cleaning up. Okay, I did. And then I went back and said, okay, I'm going to help you clean up. You know, because I wanted to see how far he got. And then I went in and said, okay, and this is what it, you know, this is to the extent that you need to clean up.
Yeah.
You know, you did good, you started, you know, but and that's one thing that I have realized is that if instead of me getting frustrated and saying, okay, I'm just going to go do it. Now I say, you know, okay, let's do it together. Let's, you know, but.
So that's why, and there's like a biological reason for that. So rather than thinking like, oh, I'm being permissive and I'm giving in and he's being defiant and I'm then doing it with him, like that's not fair. It actually makes sense from a neurological level, from a like biology level of you're really engaging with his brain. And children, whether they're on the spectrum or not, they are able to do it. It's just kind of finding the way to get there. And so if a child is pushing a limit and they're not able to do something over and over again, that's our cue to say they haven't learned it. It hasn't been meaningful to them. It hasn't been organized for them. So that means we need to break it down. So maybe you need to do like a visual of saying, these are the 3 steps he needs to do to get it clean. I love the idea of you joining him and doing the steps with him. You could add timing in. So you put a song on to do it faster. Make it more fun, and his body is going to integrate even more the more enjoyable it is and more meaningful it is. So that ultimately you get, sorry.
No, go for it. I thought you were ending there. I wanted to add to what you were saying, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, ultimately you end up having a child who can do it independently.
Okay.
And just what Dr. Baudino was talking about, like breaking it down, I think having those really clear expectations, like what does cleaning up look like? It looks like washing your dishes. It looks like putting your napkin in the trash. And then in order to shape the behavior, just setting up some sort of reinforcement plan. So every time he does it, using that positive reinforcement, like, I really like how you cleaned up. And maybe it's even having like a jar in the kitchen and you like put a ball in every time he does it. Then when the jar fills up, you get a prize or something. Students do really well with reinforcement systems, and it helps shape the behavior. And then eventually you like pull that away, and then they're hopefully just doing it on their own. So there's a lot of different ways to experiment with that too.
Okay, good, thank you.
Something I'm hearing also, just wanted to add this in, is like when you have a kid, because he's older, right? He's a teenager?
He's 13, yeah.
He's 13, yeah. So a lot of times in what I'm hearing when he's saying like, no, like I'm not, you're yelling at me, and it's kind of that adolescent, while he has neurodifferences, like he's still an adolescent, and he's, you know, kind of noticing like who his role is versus somebody else's role. So just shaping the word of like saying, I'm going to join you versus I'm going to help you, can really empower him to see that he is capable. Because especially at his age, he can do these things. So he doesn't necessarily need help, but he definitely needs to be joined, and he has to feel a connection to what he's doing. It has to make sense. So there isn't really much value in cleaning up the kitchen for him. And so he needs to learn that why, so that it's meaningful. And maybe the why is because it makes mommy happy. And that is what he's going to learn. But you can also acknowledge to him, like, I know it doesn't matter to you right now, but it does to me. And I do these things for you, and you do these things for me, because we're a team. So really kind of thinking about that meaningfulness behind it.
Okay, yeah, and I like that, you know, saying I'm going to join you with that instead of help you. That's really good. Thank you.
Yeah, and then I mean, I think it's fantastic that OT and you are working on that distinguishing tone of voice and what that means. But I'm just thinking that it sounds like it's his way of saying it doesn't work for me. Like, you're yelling at me. It's not computing. And so it's great to hear that when you were joining him, and like he was, you know, he still is practicing. This is like something he's learning over time.
Okay, yeah. Well, his inability to read people and what they're saying and all of that is not just, you know, with me.
Right.
That is something that he really struggles with.
Sure.
You know, knowing that he's pissed somebody off, or he's done something that, you know, they'll turn around and walk away because they get so frustrated with him, and he'll be like, yeah, I don't care. Yeah.
Well, that's that stress response though. You know, it's infuriating to feel when you're the other person on the other side, but it doesn't help him in that moment to be aware of the other person. He has to protect himself. His body is working really hard to protect himself all day long. And now he's in a situation that's unknown, or he didn't anticipate it. And so when that person has a feeling about him, it's like, I give up. You know, it's like you're being held up at gunshot, and and it's a yucky analogy, but it's a feeling of like, I don't know, I don't care, because I can't, if I'm him, it's like, I can't do anything about it. It already happened. And I'm a logical thinker. I'm a left brain thinker. And I just did what I did, and I was protecting myself. There are many times throughout the day, and this might get kind of emotional, but there are many times during the day that things are happening to him that no one's checking in on him about, because we wouldn't even know what that felt like. So it's confusing because he's supposed to be empathic, but not everyone's going to be empathic to him in those moments. And so right. Children with autism or on the spectrum can be very emotional and have a lot of feelings and be reading cues, but they're working on them they might not articulate them the way that we are familiar with, as you're probably learning.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we do like, you offended me. Like if he offended me, I might say like, okay, I'm going to put my feeling on hold, check in with him first, get him regulated, get him calm, and then be able to talk about, and also this bothered me. But it's kind of like we have to first notice what he needed. I have examples if that's not clear.
No, that is. And yeah, that's a totally different way to for me to think about it instead of me saying, you know, oh, I just need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I can say, okay, what, you know, where are you coming from on this?
Yeah. And also it's like, it's not so easy. It's easier said than done, especially as a parent, because they have amazing ways of triggering us, but it also models for him, wow, that's how you do empathy. Like, that's how you have feelings. Okay. She's teaching me.
I always tell the teachers at the school to use like the 3 W's, like wait, watch, and wonder. So sometimes we like place a demand on a student or on our kids, like you need to clean up. And then we like say it like 3 or 4 times, but wait like 10 seconds and see what happens. So like put the demand and wait. And because sometimes kids take a little bit longer, it takes longer for them to process the information, takes them longer to do it. And then also just simple things like getting down to eye level. I mean, I know he's older, so you're probably not getting down to eye level, but
I'm looking up at him. Yeah. He's 6 feet.
But
he's huge. Yeah.
with younger kids, if the kid is younger, getting down to eye level and making sure you're connecting with them like that, so they see you from a place of connection versus a place of authority, like standing over them. Yeah.
When we can't get on their eye level, if they're higher, anytime, and you had this on your slide that you're going to send out, Negeen, is like you connect to redirect or connect to direct. This idea of like, I see you're doing this and now we're doing this. So it's like, here, I see you're picking up 3 pieces on the floor, or I see you're walking out of the room and now I need you to come back in and continue to clean with me. So when we say what we see, it actually brings their brain and their body into the here and now. And it's a way of kind of getting them into that space versus saying, stop what you're doing and come back. You're saying, I see you're still playing your video game and now we're going to go and clean, is way different than just walking in and saying, hey, it's time to clean up. So that's a verbal way of connecting. So you always start with, I see. So it's like, oh, I see you're doing this, or, oh, cool game you're doing, or this, and now come on over.
Okay, I just wrote that one down because I'm going to use that a lot. Thank you.
Like magic. It's a magic wand. And then the other word is may. May versus can is another magic.
Can you use an example on that?
Like,
please?
you may decide to come sit with me at the table versus come sit with me at the table, or you can sit at the table. If we're giving some kind of, you may decide, it's like, they're like, oh, maybe I will. And they come on. So,
in academics, being cautious of that language, because if I ask a question, like if I ask a student, like, can you do this math problem? They'll be like, no. But you just say, do the math problem, and then they'll do it. So just in academics, it's a little bit different, being more direct, but
yes,
just emotional, using that verbiage is definitely better.
Yeah. But like you're saying, not asking a question unless you want the answer. So it's we don't say put on your seatbelt, okay? It's put your seatbelt on, or we are putting our seatbelts on. And we take away the word please because it's not an option. It's just, we're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All these fun nuances with words. But it
is. I mean,
yeah.
And it's just the little things. Like, I mean, this has nothing to do with asking him to do things, but I was talking to the OT and I said, you know, he refuses to brush his teeth in the bathroom. So he walks all over the house and then he leaves his toothbrushes. So he goes through like 5 or 10 toothbrushes a month because he's doing that. And she said, you know, so many kids on the spectrum don't like to look at themselves in the mirror. And I was like, huh? And she said, yeah, cover up the mirror. And then she told Matt, she said, you know, you're old enough. You can just turn around away from the mirror, but stay in the bathroom. And I was like, well, who knew? You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm learning all of these little things that you're like, who would have ever thought that, you know?
I know. They have this beautiful way of teaching us so much patience. It's not personal. So creative. They really know how to take care of themselves, like do what feels good to them. Like sometimes we don't do that for ourselves, but they're constantly doing that. So there's some beautiful ways to look at it. And yeah, I mean, with so much of this it's ever evolving, it's ever changing. And like, we're in this new situation with this social distancing, and you're in this new situation with like a new diagnosis. Just giving it space that that it all is for this adaptive responsive coping, and it's all about learning. Like it's going to happen over time. And if he doesn't want to be in the bathroom yet, he can and will be there at some point. And so we take away those absolutes. Like if you're saying like he refuses or he won't ever go in the bathroom, it's like we want to make sure you say you do want to go in the bathroom, but you're choosing to come out. Right? So like there's always ways to go back. So he knows that it's not a fixed thing. Even his diagnosis, there are things about it that can definitely evolve and change.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate the insight.
You're welcome. Anytime. All right, should we say goodnight?
Yes.
All right, thank you all. It's been a pleasure. And we'll send out that email.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.